I'm Dr. Yvonne Kason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International. I am very delighted and honored to introduce and pay tribute to our first speaker, PMH Atwater, and to recognize PMH in her induction as an honoree into the Spiritual Awakenings Circle of Honor.
Wow.
Let's put her beside me as I do her induction. So our Spiritual Awakenings International Circle of Honor is our Hall of Fame for groundbreakers and pioneers in the field of spiritual awakenings, and that is PMH Atwater. She is a 3-time near-death experiencer and an internationally renowned NDE researcher and the author of 21 books. Phenomenal. She has given many keynotes, appeared on numerous television shows, and has even spoken twice to groups at the United Nations. To date, her research covers nearly 5,000 adults and children who are NDE experiencers. Her latest book, The Forever Angels, Near-Death Experiences in Childhood and Their Lifelong After Impact, has been extremely helpful to childhood NDErs. Yep, there she's holding it up. So, thank you for your groundbreaking work, PMH, and congratulations on your induction into the Spiritual Awakenings International Circle of Honor.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So it is my great pleasure to interview you today. So let's start. Let's go right away.
You betcha.
So I'd like to start off by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about your own near-death experiences that launched you in this whole area of being interested in being a researcher?
Oh goodness. We're going back a ways. I was raped. I became pregnant. Then I miscarried. The first one was January 2, January 4, and March 29. That's how they went. They were the kind of experiences, like all of them are, that wake you up, and you find yourself in other places, on other planes, in other, in other worlds, and always with a real near-death experience. You're stuck with the after effects. Always there are after effects, and in my case, I could not handle them. And it took me until the fall of that year, November, when friends of mine who felt sorry for me, I was living then in Boise, Idaho. They took me up to Seattle, Washington, to the Mind Miraculous Symposium. And it was that first speaker that I found myself racing from the auditorium and planting myself under a wall phone, because he talked about what I saw in my near-death experience. And what I saw was the eternal now. The eternal now. And it just so grabbed me and touched me that I started getting well. And by the next year in Boise, Idaho, I worked in one of the special offices of a bank, and I was directed in that office to sell my home, find places for my 3 children, and leave Idaho and come to Falls Church, Virginia. Well, what's a Falls Church, Virginia? I don't know, but I did it. And so I did that. I quit my job, walked out on my life in Idaho, went first to watched the sunset over the Pacific in California, then traveled all the way to Falls Church, Virginia. There really is a Falls Church, Virginia, and saw the sunrise golden over the Atlantic. And that I'm a cop's kid. So my first experience was talking about my near-death experience in a police station, because that station had extra rooms for the community to have an affair. So I was I was in that extra room, and I finished my talk about my own near-death experience, and a woman came up with me with stars in her eyes, and she said, "Oh, I wish something like that would happen to me." And it just, no, you don't. You do not. From that moment on, I never spoke about my experience for 30 years. I spent all of my time after that doing nothing but research, hunting people, finding people, going to colleges, universities, wherever I could go to find other near-death experiencers and find out what happened to them. And so, yeah, lots of people, lots of time, lots of books. And yeah, and I look at all of that and I think, wow, it's just like, it's so now in my life, I have written a book about aliens.
Who would imagine? We'll get to that. I'm curious. You mentioned you couldn't deal with the after effects. What were the after effects that you found really hard to deal with after your NDEs?
I knew things.
Mm-hmm.
I knew all kinds of things. It's like I knew everything. And I knew things before they happened. And just all kinds of new and better and different ways of living.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, wow. But what caught me the most was being around other people and watching them and what happened in their lives and going to their families and saying, what have you noticed about? And I was a real researcher.
Yeah.
I went from block to block, home to home. Literally, in Minnesota, I was knocking on doors. People, I just would pick a block and get out and start knocking on doors.
Wow.
I even talked to a mortuary group.
Now, did you realize right away these were near-death experiences, or did it take you a while to discover that's what they were?
We didn't have a name then.
Mm.
I got my name from Elisabeth Kübler-Ross.
Mm.
I went up to visit my aunt and uncle in Chicago, Illinois, and met Elisabeth at the airport. It was just the two of us. She was waiting on a plane, been waiting an hour. So the two of us sat down on a bench, just like a couple of kids. And I talked to, and she wanted to know about my experience. So I told her, maybe almost an hour. And when we were through, she said, you had a near-death experience. Well, I never heard that term before. So I spent a lot of time off and on with Elisabeth after that. She was a good guide and a good counselor for me. a good helpmate. And she really opened a lot of doors for me.
Wow.
So that's how I got started with Elisabeth.
Wow, that is phenomenal. I mean, Spirit really looked after you that you were brought together with Elisabeth Kübler-Ross.
Yeah.
So I want to move on to the childhood near-death
Oh, yeah.
experience, the focus of today. So what first piqued your interest in the childhood near-death experience and the possibility that it was a little bit different from adult near-death experiences?
The fact that it was different.
Mhm.
A near-death experience is a near-death experience. But the child handles it differently,
Mhm.
looks at it differently. And for most children, it's really not a near-death experience. It's something else. It's something else that they can't put it in that kind of pocket. What they put it in is this wild, open place where things fit differently.
Mhm.
And so a child really, a lot of children don't want to be around adult near-death experiencers because they don't like the term. They
Mhm.
don't want to be around that kind of thinking. Um, they a child's near-death experience can even come in babyhood. It can even come at the time their birth.
Mhm.
So they can have the experience even during birth. Um, and so they grow up looking at the world very, very differently. And a lot of them have synesthesia. Synesthesia is where the brain functions differently, and they just lock into that right away. Their brain is different.
In what way is their brain different?
Um, I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
In first grade, I didn't fit in anywhere. I'd go to school and I'd spend most of the time on a tall stool wearing a tall cap, um, as an example of a bad child who told lies. And all I did was ever tell the truth. I just told the truth. And at the end of the first grade, I decided that all adults were stupid and I never wanted to be an adult. I mean, a child looks at the world differently, and after a near-death experience, many of them have outer body trips. Out of body trips are normal for them,
Mhm.
and so they're looking at their dad taking off in a car. They'll follow the dad. They're looking at the mom in the kitchen. They're in the kitchen watching what their mother does. They know and see what's going on, where the parents can't figure this out. I mean, what do you mean you're watching me? Um, so for a child, and for a child in school, again, they have synesthesia. Many of them have synesthesia. So
Please tell us what synesthesia is, because I think many people don't know what that is. Synesthesia, what is that?
the brain works differently, and it's like, um, how do I describe it? It's like it's like the brain is functioning differently, and you're seeing things differently. You're feeling things differently than a normal person might do. So for them, uh, they have wonderful, um, wonderful memories but their memories will be very differently. Let me give you an example. This is Olaf Sundin. Olaf is he's a Swede. He had a botched tonsillectomy at 14 years old. When it was over, he suddenly was filled with all knowledge. He took up a chemistry. He had 100 chemical patents for trees, paper, and pulp. He just knew what to do with trees. Let me give you another one, Marcel Vogel. Marcel Vogel was 6 years old when he had his. He died of double lobar pneumonia. He had a voice say, "You will be a phosphor chemist. You will do pioneering work in luminescence. You will write a book and create your own business." His NDE caused him to question the meaning of life. He was fascinated by glowworms. And that enabled him to work for IBM for 27 years and 32 patents.
Oh, wow.
And he got it
Phenomenal.
all from his near-death experience.
Phenomenal. So what are some of the biggest differences in terms of content and features between a childhood NDE and an adult NDE? Are there differences in content and features?
Not necessarily different, different in how they accept it.
Ah.
For a child, they accept it.
Mm.
Adult, oh, look what happened to me. Look what happened to me. Oh, I need to understand this. You know, they'll join IANs, they'll join your group or whatever group. Um, that they try to understand what's going on. A child, oh, I know what's going on. And the child, gee, how would I, the average child, how do I put this into words? The average child knows things. They just know it. So when they go to school, they already know that. Well, the teachers and everybody is looking at them saying, well, how can you know that? How can you know that? But the child, they already know that and understand that. Um, a child is often a misfit,
Mm.
or they'll try to be like everybody else,
Mm.
but they aren't, and it doesn't fit. Um, a child in school, if a child is a near-death experiencer and they're in school, they know what the other kids are talking about. They know what the teacher is talking about. They've already been there. They've already done that. And the teacher is looking at them. No, you haven't. We haven't discussed that yet. So the child is bored, just bored out of their tree. Um, Another thing you'll notice with a child experiencer, they don't understand why adults take so long to figure things out. I mean, what's the matter with these stupid adults? Um, and with being around lots of other people, it's like they suddenly just don't fit. They just don't fit. Um, it, I think the biggest thing is being around others. most child experiencers do not like adult experiencers because they think adult experiencers are stupid. So they like being around, but they don't fit with child experiencers either. So they often grow up very independent, or they slide right through something. They just they just simply don't fit. And again, this thing about synesthesia, the brain functions differently, they see different, and they just don't fit around other kids.
Fascinating. I'm a childhood near-death experiencer. I
Well,
had
did you fit?
two childhood near-death experiences, one at the age of 5, one at the age of 11. And what I would say is my experience was I never classified it as paranormal because it was my normal. It never dawned on me that these are
Right.
paranormal experiences. And flying down the street and, flying with my out-of-body experiences, how I understood it as a child was that I could fly. And, so I could fly. So I'm laughing because I can identify with so many things that you're saying, PMH. So I'd like to ask you about NDE after effects because you've looked a lot at adults' NDE after effects and children's NDE after effects. Is there a difference in the after effects between adults and children?
Yes, yes. With children, they accept it. Adults normally don't. Adults like, what happened to me? What happened? What's going on here? And the kid will say, well, that happened. I'll handle it.
I can fly.
Glowworms, like Marcel Vogel. Yeah, these little glowworms. Yeah.
So in your book, you say that childhood NDE experiences are outliers. What do you mean by saying they're outliers?
It's like they live in another world, or they live differently in our world. Somehow they don't fit in this world. They're like you in your own experience. You had these experiences, but you didn't fit the world you were in. You were always ahead of everybody, or you didn't fit like everybody else did. Somehow you learned how to handle that part of the world in a different way. Children just stand out as foreign. They just stand out as foreign. They know they don't fit, so it's like, where an adult will work through it and try to find out. A kid is, well, that's what it is.
That's what it is. Yeah.
That's what it is.
You also say in your book that sometimes the way we can recognize a childhood NDErs is by their lifelong after effects. Can you explain that? Because I think it's very true, but I'd like you to explain that.
Gee, where
I find that sometimes people don't realize they had a childhood NDE until they hear you talking about after effects and they go, I've got all of those after effects. I guess I must have had a childhood NDE when I almost died.
they simply don't fit this world. and so they find a different way of living. You and yours, I'm sure, found a different way to study, or a different way to learn this, or a different way to do this. Um, they do. They just simply find another way to handle things.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at adults who are disturbed by their experience or questioning their experience, and they say that, "Well, you dumb adult." No, I mean, what's the matter with you? Uh,
I'd like to ask you about something else you mentioned in your book about prayer beams that childhood NDErs see sometimes. Prayer
oh my
beams. Can you tell
goodness.
us about the prayer beams?
Let me give you an example. There's this church, and everybody attended the church. And when church was over, let's say later on that day, the child would see all these beams going out. Uh, and they came to realize, oh, that's the beams from the people saying prayers inside.
Mhm.
And they would follow the beams. Um, Children see prayer as beams of light. They don't see prayer as prayer, something you talk about or read about. No, for them, prayer is light that goes out. It's a beam of light. And many of them will follow those beams. It just took, grabbed my heart
Mhm.
when they would talk about following those beams and get to where the beam went and realize somebody there really did need prayer, and they would stay there for as long as they could and help that individual. So it's a literal beam that they follow. um, Almost like a rainbow, only not quite, but they follow that beam. um, a child experience experiencer takes the world as they see it, and that for them is factual. The world as they see it as factual, and that world world can be different colors, different sizes, different objects, but for them that's real. I read across a number of uh, uh, children who later on became models, and for them that was very, very easy to be a model, because they would see those colors and those lights, and they would just simply follow them or be them. I read across a number of children who became very wealthy, child experiencers who became very, very wealthy, and again the beams, and they would just simply follow the beams and do what the beams do, and became very wealthy from doing that.
Wow.
The only time I read across child experiencers who had trouble is when they would follow these beams or follow what seemed to be what was ahead of them that seemed to be need to be followed, and it shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been. They shouldn't have been doing it, or got them into trouble. Because to them that was real. That was. It's like you in school. And in school, you would learn things that was real to you. You would learn that and it was real. For them, it is real. And they find out, no, it wasn't. You need to do this, or you need to do that, or you should have done this. And the child is saying, what?
Yeah. So it's not real to other people, but it was very real to the child.
Very real to the child.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Absolutely.
So another thing that's very fascinating you write about in your book that I'm sure you want to talk about is about childhood NDErs who have encounters with aliens and other ET experiences. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, now you're now now we're getting into another subject, really, and not just children. There's adults too. Um, Aliens. Well, my dear, that voice that spoke to me after the third time after my near-death experience, the one that told me to do the research. I never heard from that voice again until 3 years ago. Not
Three
at
years
all.
ago. 3 years
Yeah.
ago.
Never heard from that voice again. Not once. Not once. And that voice was so different. It just didn't fit other kinds of voices, or spirits or guides, or it didn't fit. It wasn't like it just wasn't like those kind of voices. Um, so it spoke to me again 3 years ago, and it's like, and I was quietly sleeping, 3:15 in the morning, and that voice spoke to me, woke me up, and spoke to me, and wanted me to do another project. And it's like, oh, I did that project. I did it. All these years and all that work. I don't have to do it again. Well, that voice kept talking. And what it wanted to know was if during a near-death experience you were met or in any way there was another being, not like a human being, another being involved. Find out about that other being. And my answer, of course, was no. But it came out to be a yes, yes. I'll do it. I'll do it. And it wasn't within a couple of weeks afterward that a woman from MUFON, MUFON, and these are the people that chase out other beings, all this stuff about people from other worlds.
UFOs and
Yeah,
extraterrestrials. Yeah.
all of that. And started contacting me. Well, I didn't know those people. They contacted me. How did that happen? And so I began to listen, and I began to follow that. Where is this? Why are you contacting me? So I met a lot of them, and all of a sudden, my telephone or my computer or being around people, they would talk about aliens, and especially if they were near-death experiencers, they would start talking about aliens. And I was going, oh, why? What? Why? Why are you talking? And it was specific, again, specific. I had to go after those during their near-death experience or within a year of their near-death experience were contacted by aliens, people from other worlds.
And what did you find?
I found things that blew me away.
Yeah.
Especially about myself.
Tell us.
I've found that I was one of them. That I had come from another planet, a water planet, that went nova in the Sirius system. There were originally 3 in that system. There's now 2. And I was from that 3rd one. And there were 15 ships that came. They came to this planet, and they went all over this planet. I don't know what happened to them. It took about 7 to 8 years to land. And I found that living here was awful. It was absolutely awful. The water here was stinky and awful because the water where I came from was like silk. The water here is rough. Living here was rough. It was terrible. And I came to recognize and realize that after my near-death experience, when I was talking to Elisabeth Kübler-Ross in Chicago, at the Chicago airport, she was telling me about some things that happened, and I couldn't know more about those things until I went to a special retreat that she held. She called it Shanti Nilaya. And it was in Southern California. There was an observatory there. And I went in with a friend of mine just to see what it was like. And while I was sitting in that chair, my eyes, the lid went down and up. Our eyelids did not close like it does now. No. The upper lid goes up and the lower lid goes down.
Mm.
And I began to realize I'm not like other people. I'm really not like other people. And I began to realize and see that I was another being from another world. How could that be? But yet in my near-death experience, part of my near-death experience, I saw that. Mm. And I didn't pay any attention to it because it didn't fit my, it didn't seem to fit who I thought I was. Mm-hmm. And slowly but surely, I began to realize that is who I am. And my husband wasn't bothered by this at all. He accepted Arrakis. That's its name. He accepted Arrakis in our home perfectly. Didn't bother him at all. And after a while, we begged Arrakis to leave because it was bothering everybody else. But I began to realize when we're talking about UAPs or we're talking about alien beings, we're really not talking about alien beings. If you really get into it, you find that the alien beings that truly exist or once did are not who and what we think they are. And they're far older than television and UAPs. They're far older. Mm-hmm. And I began to realize that in my own case, I was born in Twin Falls, Idaho. I was born about maybe a mile from the lip of our huge canyons that we have in southern Idaho, and that those canyons in our newspaper at home, Twin Falls, Idaho, they would talk about these saucers that would go up and down the canyons long before the fellow was from Idaho who saw them in an airplane and first wrote about it. They're much older than that. Mm-hmm. And that I was born about a mile from these hoppers that were going up and down the canyon. And it just blew me away. The more I got into this research, the more I began to learn about myself, mm-hmm. who I really am, and how I can better see myself and know myself and what alien is. Wow. And I finally got a hold of the Twin Falls newspaper, got a hold of those people, and got a hold of those the newspaper clippings long ago that were written about these hoppers going up and down the canyon. And I laughed and laughed. We did. Today, we get so excited about this kind of thing when that was happening 10 long decades, years ago. We get excited today about what excited people decades and decades ago. That what we call an alien being in many cases is a part of ourselves, is ourselves, as we once were eons ago when we came to this planet.
Well, thank you for sharing this so openly, PMH. We've had at least two, and in fact, one was yesterday, near-death experiencers who shared that in their near-death experience or shortly afterwards, they discovered that their home planet was a water planet and that their soul had been incarnated in past incarnations in this water planet. And the one yesterday was even saying that there were these wars and the planet was destroyed. And other ones have told me and shared with SAI. So you're not the first to tell us. So know that, PMH, you're not alone. There are other people who have had memories of that they were previously incarnated on water planets, and they say the feeling was it was home. They missed their water planet. So it's and others have had incarnations. Some call themselves star seeds, that they realize that they come from other planets. Their souls have been incarnated on other planets. So that was phenomenal. What are some of the things you've learned from other near-death experiencers or childhood near-death experiencers about remembering it? So you started researching, you discovered about yourself. What about other NDErs you've talked to?
I'm surprised at what I found.
Mhm.
Because it wasn't just me alone. It was Whitley Strieber, it was Kenneth Ring, it was all these other people, and John Mack, Dr. John Mack. And John Mack and I used to do a number of phone calls. He had an organization called Peer, a big P, and then there's a period, a big E, there's a period, and another E, there's a period, and then another P. His organization and I, John Mack and I were friends. I'd go up there. He knew about Arrakis. And so we had made an appointment that in 2 months, I would be up there in Massachusetts, where he was, and we would go further and deeper into that and that story in 2 months. Then the news came that John Mack had died in London, England. He got they drive differently than we do here. And he got off the curb and started to walk and was hit by a passing car. And I was thunderstruck because John and I were fairly close. And I wanted to know more. I wanted to know more about that kind of being. He found a number of them like that, a number of them, and had written about them. Not just an alien being that popped up and was um, over your home, and you were beamed up. No, alien beings that came here and wanted to stay here and wanted to be a part of this world. So we wanted to get into that deeper. Now John Mack was gone. And Whitley, well, I love Whitley, especially his wife Anne. But couldn't go that route. Ken Ring, that wonderful Dr. Kenneth Ring, who he's the one that proved that Raymond Moody was right, and and it's like hearing that John had passed.
Mm. Mm. So my original question was, in terms of NDErs that you have spoken to, is this something, I mean, I know that Dr. Kenneth Ring has written about this. Is this something you're also finding, that once you specifically ask, that many NDErs say yes, either during my NDE or within a year afterwards, I've had some sort of ET contact? Is it a big percentage, a small percentage? What have you found?
I found 38 who agreed to be in the book. So there was 38 people. I wasn't going after percentages,
Okay.
this kind of thing, but people willing to talk about it. I found them.
Yeah.
I found 38 of them. So the book Aliens in the Near-Death Experience really was in 3 parts. The first part, the early days, and when my husband and I then lost our farm. We were farmers then, back in Twin Falls, Idaho. And the things we went through. And after that, what I went through as a researcher.
Mm.
And the incredible things as I went through as a researcher. And of course, part 3, then talking about Arrakis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So being able to look at it from different angles, being able to really get a good look, not just as how many did you find? I'm not interested in that. I want to know what you go through.
Mm-hmm.
I want to
Mm-hmm.
know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know how it's affecting you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know the full picture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't want to know how many.
Yeah. Well, I think that is really, really important, because in my experience, people who have had these types of encounters, many are not willing to talk about it. and many people find it traumatic. It's something that they have to remain in the closet about. So I'm really glad that you've opened up this topic and that you have written a book about it and you shared a bit about it today. I want to just get back to the childhood near-death experience. There are a couple more questions before we get on to the question. I'm going to open the chat and let people tell me some questions they'd like you to answer. But something I was fascinated in your book was you said that many canonized saints of the Catholic Church had near-death experiences when they were very young, that they were childhood NDEs. Can you give us a couple examples? I didn't know of any that did.
I couldn't give you names,
Mhm. Mm.
unfortunately. I just noticed
Mm.
that and it caught my attention that here we've got Catholic bishops and people high up in the Catholic Church um, that are very familiar with this kind of thing.
My goodness. I mean, I personally am convinced St. Francis of Assisi had a near-death
Oh, he
experience, but
did.
he
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 did.
had it as an adult, yeah.
He
But
did.
I want to get back to the childhood NDErs again, is that you say in your book that interestingly, childhood NDErs that were not Christians, if they encountered Jesus while they're on the other side, they instantly recognized them, regardless of their background, that they recognized Jesus when they saw him. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
How can I say it? It was them, and they were it. It's sort of like John Mack was uh, was doing it because he used a lot of hypnosis. Um, they recognized themselves
Mm, interesting.
looking back at them. Um, and I talk about that in the book
Mhm.
that you're not looking at somebody else, you're looking at yourself.
Mm, phenomenal.
And it's this idea of alien beings is nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense.
Mhm.
We are all beings.
Yes.
We are all we are all part of a phenomenon
Yeah.
that is so great
Hmm.
to that to call it a near-death experience, to call it an alien experience, is utter nonsense. It is a reality
Mm.
of life.
Hmm. So you are expanding what is the normal paradigm of life, which I think people at our conference will absolutely agree with. I'm
Well,
now going to start with some of the questions from the audience, if I may. So if you have questions for PMH, please put them into the chat. And the first question, this comes from Linda. She says, "Did you get a message to write books during one of your NDEs?"
my dear, okay, in my third near-death experience, I was told to do the research, right?
Mm.
So I did. I went out and did the research, and in doing the research, um, one of my friends was Kenneth Ring, and he said, put it in a book.
Put it in a book. So it was
Write
Kenneth
about it.
Ring, good old Kenneth. He's
Ken
also a
Ring.
friend of mine. Well,
So it was Ken Ring.
and your books have been so helpful to people. Linda has another question about childhood NDE experiencers. Do they have more sensitivities? And what are some of the sensitivities and health issues that childhood experiencers face?
Do they have more experience,
No, more sensitivities.
more sensitivities?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because they're open to them. Yes, because it's part of their life. Yes, because it's their reality. An adult um, um, turn away from that. A child opens up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's just part of their world.
Right.
And the problem children have is their parents or their brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
That 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 can be a real problem with children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And absolutely, really, pardon
Yeah.
me, but
It's a great book. It's a
I go
great
in
book.
depth.
Yeah.
Um,
So let me ask another question, if I may. Valerie would like to know, in your experience and in your research, about what percentage of childhood NDErs try to fit in versus what percentage approximately don't even bother fitting in anymore. Say that's this, I'm just different.
I'm not going to give you percentages.
Hmm.
I'm going to say that the average child experiencer will try to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
They really try.
I did.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you absolutely try.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
But I always thought I was from another planet. Isn't that interesting?
yeah,
I thought,
well, you
I must be from another planet, and that must be why I'm different, is what I used to think when I was a
were.
kid.
You really try, and they just don't succeed. Oh yeah, yeah. They really try,
Mhm.
um, but they don't succeed. A lot of
Mhm.
them don't succeed. Those that do, um, some of them have problems with that, and some don't.
Mhm.
But a lot of them have problems with it. They'll toss it.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Elizabeth has an interesting question, and she'd like to know, did you ever come across a childhood NDEer who didn't remember their NDE or maybe didn't realize it was an NDE, then went on much later in life as an adult to start having out-of-body experiences and
Oh, absolutely.
STEs?
Most of them. Most of them. Most of
Mm-hmm.
them. Absolutely. And in fact, many of them started having the out of body experiences as a child or as a baby. Uh, um, very often as a baby, um, or when they're still when they're a child, not maybe 4 or 5, even 6 or 7. Um, it becomes so embarrassing for them to be different,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of different with other children their own age. So it becomes a real issue in school. I want to give you an example. from my own life. For me, it was with synesthesia.
Mm-hmm.
First grade, I had nothing but trouble in the first grade with synesthesia. So much so that the teacher had me sit on a stool with a
Dunce cap, you
with a
mentioned that.
dunce
Yeah.
cap on it. Yeah, and at the end of school, I just decided that all adults were stupid.
All right. Cliff has an interesting question. Cliff would like to know, how can we support childhood NDErs so they get the support early on after their experience? What will help them in their lives if we recognize it's a child NDEer? It's a good question. My son had an
Yeah.
NDE when he was 7. My son.
Yours?
Yes.
All
That's
right.
my next question is going to be whether NDEs run in families because my father had an NDE, I had several NDEs, and my sons had an NDE. So that's question 2. But
Whoa.
you can answer both questions.
As an adult, if you have a child that's different, let them be different. Please let them be different. Um, love them for that. And that will make it and that will make a huge difference all by itself. And it will help the child grow up feeling okay. That's the big thing. Let your child be different. It's okay.
All right. What about my question about NDEs running in families? Have you found that at all?
Yes, I have. I have found that once in a while, not that often, but I found it every once in a while.
Oh, you can add me to your files.
uh, there just seems to be something about the need for this kind of experience to happen in families that will accept it.
Interesting.
To happen in families that will accept it. So the child doesn't run through so much trauma.
Mm-hmm.
In the book are children who went through trauma because they talked about it. The child that goes through a lot of trauma because of what happened faces life in a very different way, a very difficult way, because they weren't listened to, because they were in a family that wouldn't accept that kind of thing, that it was nonsense. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Be in a family where it's um, where it's not that difficult for them.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yep, certainly that's true in my family. When my son had his, it was like, this is the new normal in our family. People in our family have near-death experiences. I have one final question, and then we're going to wrap up this incredible session, which is about the integration of childhood NDEs. And you say in your book that you have found that childhood NDEs take a lot longer in general to integrate their NDEs. You say 20 to 40 years.
Yes,
Me, it was even longer. While adults, you think you find on average 7 to 10 years to integrate. So why do you
yeah,
think it takes children so much longer?
because the other people around them are not like them.
Mm,
The other people around them uh, behave in a certain way that that it's hard for them to match that.
mm,
In this one woman's family, she always felt like she was a witch or something because
mm,
the family um, wouldn't have anything to do with her, or it was very, very difficult for her, even as she grew. Not just the child or the teenager, but a young woman and an older woman, even as she grew. And I found that true of many other people.
mhm.
If they're not accepted when they're young, they're uh, seldom accepted when they're older, even as
Yeah.
their grandparents. Um, so oh my goodness, if if the they can be accepted, or at least more open when they're a child,
Mhm.
so much better when they're older and older and older, even as grandparents. Um, uh, it makes life so much easier for them if they're accepted, if they're open, uh, if people are open to them.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, PMH, for an absolutely phenomenal, fascinating um, interview about childhood near-death experiencers, aliens and near-death experiencers, all of the above. And thank you again for your years and years and years of research in this area. It has helped so many people with your books. And finally, congratulations once again on your induction as an honoree into the Spiritual Awakenings International Circle of Honor. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.